And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio. Thank you for joining me on this fine and lovely Friday night. And welcome to those who are already joining the live chat, Steelers Pittsburgh and Lumberjack. I hope to be joined by plenty more tonight. And before I begin, as always, I just want to encourage you to please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we bring you just a live show just about every night. You got this show, you got Touchdown Under, you got the Steelers Preview, you got the Steelers Hangover, you got the Scobro Show, you got the Curtain Call, you got the War Room. I believe that's a live show, although that might be audio only. Anyway, it's hosted by Maddie Peverell. And of course, you could check us out also on YouTube. On Facebook and YouTube Live, all those shows, and you can catch them all on any audio platform after the fact. And we ask you to please download parts 1 and 2. And of course, we have audio only shows like the Steelers Retro Show, Live Mike, Let's Ride, the Stat Geek, and the Curtain Call. I'm not the Curtain Call, the War Room. Am I missing anything? I'm sure I am, but there's so many. Please check those out on any audio platform, and check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. Anytime there's a transaction by the Pittsburgh Steelers, or anytime they sign somebody, they cut somebody, they trade for somebody, they trade away somebody, we bring it to you as fast as we can. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. So please check that out. And here's one from Lumberjack already. He teases me with his presence, and he takes it away. He says, "Can't stay for the show, but wanted to pop in and say hey to everyone. And Tony, I'll watch you later." Well, thank you, Lumberjack. Please check us out later. And good luck with whatever you have going on tonight. I hope you have a lot of fun. And before I continue, there's George Teston. And George Teston, I'm glad you showed up. My goodness. I don't know how this guy remembered this, but he wished me a happy birthday the other night on the preview. He donated a $2 super chat to Jeff, Dave, and Brian. I don't know how you remembered that, but I'm honored, and I thank you for that. So you're the best, George. And of course, welcome to the show. There's Patricia, Roberto, my man Terry, T Money, Jared Devil, Double HH. And let's see, is that everybody? It's everybody so far. So thank you all for joining me. And as always, I have a variety of topics I'd like to discuss on tonight's show. And the first thing I want to discuss is the schedule reveal that was revealed on the day of my birthday, Wednesday the 12th. And people, believe it or not, it was a very much anticipated event, which it just blows me away every year that these kind of things are huge with the fans. And we, like, when you think about it, we already knew the who and the where when it comes to the Steelers schedule, but the when seems to be the an intoxicating event, even more so than the other stuff. So it was a big deal. It was big news all day. Michael Beck and Jeff and everybody, they were canvassing social media, looking for leaks and trying to decipher everything and figure out who Pittsburgh would play. And it just amazed me how much the NFL has become a 365-day-a-year league. I mean, it's just Jeff referenced this the other night on the show, but I've been saying it for years. I remember when the Steelers, their schedule would be released, and we wouldn't even know about it, really, unless we really went and looked. We wouldn't know about when they signed some assistant coach or even a coordinator. It wasn't really that big of a deal. I mean, it was news, but it wasn't like something that was debated nonstop and people either cheered or lost their minds over it. And you know, even the jersey numbers by the rookies, you know, that was news. Kendrick Green wearing number 53 and Najee sticking with his 22 and Dan Moore even 65. Is that an impressive number? I don't know. Is that a legacy number? I don't think it is. Maybe he'll make it one. But you know, stuff like that. Obviously, the draft has been big forever since I was a kid, but it's only grown, especially with the help of social media and blogs and and mock drafts, and so it's gotten bigger. But the fact that the schedule reveal is such a big event, it just shows you how just huge the NFL is, and we're still in the golden age of the league. Whether people think that it's on a downward spiral or not, I don't know, but we're clearly still in the golden age of it. Otherwise, I don't think the release of the schedule would be as huge as it is. I remember, and this is a wrestling thing. I remember at the height of the Attitude Era, I think it was like 1999, The Rock and Mick Foley, who was playing Mankind on this particular segment of Monday Night Raw, they stood in the middle of the ring for like 45 minutes. This is when they were buddies. They were like the odd couple that era, the Rock and Sock connection, or whatever they called it. And it was like a 45-minute version of This Is Your Life. I think it was The Rock's birthday. And it was huge. And they did no wrestling. They didn't further any storylines. They stood in the middle of the ring, and they did a This Is Your Life segment, and it killed. People loved it. They ate up every second of it. So that's kind of like what the NFL is right now when it comes to anything that they consider news, anything that they want to promote, whether it's the schedule, what number a rookie might be wearing. People just eat it up. That's where we're at with the NFL. So it's not going away anytime soon in terms of being the national pastime. So let's see what else we have here. We have some more people joining the live chat. Ryan O'Toole, Mike Kaiser, Donald Nolan. If I didn't get you already, Kathy Forred, Clarence Washington. It says Tony, the great group from the early 90s. I remember it well. Great supermarket music. When I was working in a supermarket back then, that's how I became familiar with Tony. So that's whenever I think of that group, I think of my first job. So welcome to everybody. Thaddeus Kennedy. Here he says regarding the draft, he says, I remember reading the draft results in the sports section of the Sunday newspaper. Well, I wouldn't. I've been pretty keenly aware of the event since probably the age of 14. In fact, I remember coming home from school the day of the 1986 draft. Back then, it was held on a Tuesday, and I wanted them so bad to draft Keith Byers. He was a running back from Ohio State, and they drafted 9th that year, which was their highest draft position in, 15, 16 years since they drafted Terry Bradshaw number 1 in 1970. I was like, please let it be Keith Byers, because I knew him. I watched him. He was a known guy, right? And and he was also a running back, and I was a huge running back mark back in the day. I love running backs. I think he was a fullback, and he basically went on to have a career as essentially a kind of like an H-back where he caught, a boatload of like hundreds of passes out of the backfield. That's basically what he was, kind of like a glorified tight end. But anyway, I wanted them to draft him, and instead they drafted John Rienstra, this guard out of Temple who I never heard of, So I was pretty disappointed. But the next year they drafted Rob Woodson, and I stayed home from school for that. My mom let me do that, and that was fantastic. So, but yeah, to your point about like assistant coaches and coordinator and who the team captain was and what undrafted free agents they may have signed. That was all like, page 5 kind of stuff back then. Now it's like, everything's just blown up. Like people are asking me about Shakur Brown and Lamont Wade and all these undrafted free agents. I'm like, I don't know. I know Shakur Brown graded out pretty well for Pro Football Focus, but I also know he didn't score really well on his pro day, which may explain why he slipped out of the draft altogether. And people are saying, well, they got great value with him as an undrafted free agent, but what's up with that pro day? Why were his numbers so bad? So it's players like that I never even heard of back when I was a kid, or even in the 90s until training camp and preseason, and you got to see these guys play. So I just marvel at it. And as a big NFL fan, I don't necessarily get into all this stuff as far as the schedule reveal. I have fun with it. I actually found myself anticipating it, even though I don't know why. I mean, the who and the where. It's just, I guess, the when. It's like, all right, I guess I could see where that's important. where the bye winds up being scheduled, who they open up with, where they open up, how their season, how the schedule unfolds, who they play at the end. It's going to be an AFC North team, but is it at home? Is it on the road? Is it the Browns? Like it is every other year practically. So yeah, that's all intriguing. But it's just it's something that if the NFL wouldn't pump this up, I don't know if fans would really be all that worried about it. But maybe they were clamoring for it years ago, and the NFL saw an opportunity, and it just decided to make it an event, which it really is an event now in 2021. And it's been that way, gosh, I'd say since as far back as I can remember, since I've been doing this on Behind the Steel Curtain, since I've been blogging, writing about the Steelers all the way back in the early 2010s. I remember it's been an annual event. So whatever keeps your league relevant, you got to do it. If the fans are responding to it, you have to do it. And the NFL, they're masters at it. They're fantastic at it. I mean, they could probably have this event and put it up against like a playoff game in the NBA or the NHL or a baseball game and get better ratings. I mean, that's just how insatiable the fans are when it comes to the NFL. It's just it's remarkable. And, it's something that basically began as far as the league being as popular as it is now. This started back in like the late 50s, really, with the greatest game ever played with the Giants and the Colts. And it just kind of mushroomed from there. The AFL was invented not invented, but it came about in 1960. And they brought a brand new brand of football, more high flying, a lot of passing. The players weren't really as talented, so they had to be innovative, and it was like a lot of innovative offense. And eventually those two leagues merged and the Super Bowl was invented, and here we are today. So kudos to the NFL for getting us to care about the schedule release. So speaking of which, I want to talk about the schedule and what I think of it. Why wouldn't I? I mean, if I'm ever going to talk about the NFL schedule, it's going to be right after 2 days after the thing was released. And the first thing that comes to mind, obviously they open up against Buffalo, the AFC runners up, however you say that, on September 12th. And it's going to be a tough matchup because the Bills are a really good team, and they had their way with Pittsburgh last year, I guess on Sunday Night Football. That was in the middle of their end of season slump, and the Steelers didn't look good. Although, there were a couple plays, I guess, at some point in that game. I can't remember exactly, but there were some critical plays that had they gone the other way, Pittsburgh may have won that game. So, but people were complaining about that. This is the seventh year in a row that they've opened up, that they're going to open up on the road. The last time they opened up at home was in 2014. And to me, I just think it's a coincidence. To me, does it really matter? Because when you look at the schedule, and I wrote all this stuff down because I don't like looking at my phone during the show. And not that there's anything wrong with it. I just don't like doing it. But anyway, after that game, 4 of the next 5 are at home. So, I mean, would you rather have that? I would. I mean, that's a good way to start the year. And the first 3 games are at 1 p.m. I think, as I wrote about in the article that was published today, you have a new offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. You have some questions. You're going to have questions with the offensive line. The secondary is going to be a question until they figure things out with the other cornerback and with the slot cornerback. So I think it's great to have kind of a sort of routine start to the year as far as the start of a game. I think most players, if they were to be totally honest, they would probably say, yeah, I'd like to have all the games at 1 o'clock, because athletes are creatures of habit. They're all about their routine. If it gets look at last year with COVID, and anytime there was a postponement, anytime there was a cancellation, players just went nuts. They hated it. they're creatures of habit. So I think having 3 straight games starting at 1:00 to start the year, I think that's going to be good for them to get off to a decent start. And looking at the schedule, I mean, yeah, it's tough. They have a first place schedule, and they're playing the Bills, they're playing the Chiefs. Gosh, they're playing the Packers, the Titans, obviously the Ravens and the Browns twice apiece, and Seahawks. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I can read the whole thing, but it's tough. It's the toughest schedule in the league. But that's just as of now, and I'm looking at this, and maybe I'm just overly optimistic, but just based on how many games are at home and the quality of opponent. I mean, you have the Bears in there. By week 10, they'll have played the Bears and the Lions and the Broncos, who aren't really that good. The Bengals at home, the Raiders at home. I mean, I think they could be 6-3, which, I mean, it's not horrible. I mean, it's not 9-0 like it was last year, but I don't think anybody was expecting that to happen last year, and I don't think anybody's expecting that to happen this year. So if you get up to a 6-3 start, it gets tougher towards the end, which it seems to always do for Pittsburgh. You have the Chiefs in the 15th game, or week 16, I guess. And the Browns on Monday Night Football, the penultimate game. And of course, they close out at the Ravens. They have the Ravens. Their first game against the Ravens is December 5th. And that's at home. And then after that, they have to play on Thursday Night Football against the Vikings, who aren't really that great. At least they weren't last year. And I think if they get off to like a decent start, then, they find out about themselves. They find out what they have on offense. They find out, how effective Matt Canada's offense is, and if they can build on that, which I think every team should be doing. They should be not just sticking with one sort of scheme all year. They should be building on that and building off of that. So you find out what you have there, and then you can sort of roll into the second half of the year. And with it, there's a 7th playoff team now in each conference. There's a 17th game. I mean, I think it's, I think they can be competitive this year. Honestly, I really do. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan. I'm saying that just based on the talent on the roster. Are they one of the elite teams in the NFL? No, but they're also not one of the worst teams in the NFL either. So I think they can be competitive. And really, like when you see all these teams bunched together on some list in like January before the schedule is officially released, it looks intimidating. Oh my gosh, they got the Ravens twice and the Browns twice and the Titans and all these teams and the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, and if he's even going to be there by then, who knows? But when you see it all laid out in front of you, it doesn't really look that bad. It looks like a regular old schedule, like any other year. And believe me when I tell you, there are going to be some teams on here on this schedule, and I talked about this last week with Mark Davison on the Touchdown Under when I was joining him for that show. There are going to be some teams on here that did really well last year that aren't going to be as good, and there'll probably be some teams that are better. So it's all going to even out. But it's if anybody's looking for them to win 2 games or 3 games and that's it, it's not going to happen. So I look for them to be competitive and be in it till the very end, just like they've been for the last however many years under Mike Tomlin, since going back really since 2003. That's like the last time really you could point to a Steelers season where they were out of it well before the year was even over. So I'll get into more of that in the second half of the show, but I just wanted to share my thoughts on the schedule, and it looks rough, but I don't remember a schedule that didn't look pretty rough on paper. They all look tough. I mean, it's the NFL, right? I mean, even if you finished in last place the year before, it doesn't guarantee you're going to have a good year because you have a last place schedule. You also have a roster that finished in last place the year before, so you have a lot more to worry about than your schedule when you're coming off like a 3-13 season. So, on that note, at the 1942 mark, wow, I've been on for 20 minutes already. I'm gonna take a break, and if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, please stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. If you're listening on an audio platform, I thank you for listening to part 1. And please listen to part 2, because I'm going to talk more about what I think of the Steelers for 2021 and what the record may be. And I'll take some questions and comments in addition to that. So please don't go anywhere and download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, Tony Defio. If you were watching on YouTube and Facebook, I thank you for sticking with me. If you downloaded part 2, you guys are awesome. Thank you for doing that. And I just have a few more things I wanted to, not a few more things, a couple more things I wanted to talk about. At my age, the age of 49, you tend to ramble and forget things. No, that's just an excuse. Anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk about is where I think the Steelers are going to finish next year. And before I get into that, I want to get into the idea that the NFL, which I guess would be Goodell and the other owners and the high-ranking executives, whoever the administrators, they hate the Steelers. They hate them. Every year, you always hear, every time there's a schedule release, there's always complaints about the bye, about why they open up on the road again, and why do they always have to play the Ravens on a short week, that kind of thing. The NFL is out to get the Steelers. But that's just not true. Obviously, it's just not true. The NFL loves the Steelers, and the reason why I know this is because they have 5 primetime games, which is the maximum, and that means they're a coveted property. They're coveted by NBC. They're coveted by ESPN. Whoever's doing the streaming, the Thursday night, was it Amazon this year? I don't. They want them. They're a valuable property. So they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't think highly of the Steelers. They know that they have a national and a world following, as evidenced by Matty Peverall and Mark Davison. That those are just 2 examples of they're from Australia, and they're big fans, and they have a podcast where they talk about the Steelers every week. So they have an international following, and they know this. So believe it or not, they probably want. I don't care. I don't think the NFL cares who wins the Super Bowl. And I think they want the attractive teams to make a run and to go far and to have success. I don't think they care at all whether the Steelers ever win another Super Bowl. But I guarantee you, they probably want them to be successful every year and make a run at the Super Bowl every year, because if they do that, that means it's going to be great for their ratings. Because if you look at any year, you go back and look at the previous year's top 20. The 20 highest rated games in the NFL from the previous year, 2020, 2019, 18, 17. Just go back and just Google it. The Steelers are going to be in on that list 3 or 4 or 5 times. They just are. Remember, I don't know if I want to bring this up, but the 2017 with all the everything that happened, what was going on the sidelines, and ratings were dropping, and fans were threatening to never watch again, burning stuff, and that the Steelers stood in the tunnel, and people were done. Well, a few weeks later, they played in Kansas City, and it was a 4:25 game or something like that. It was a 4:00 game, and it was CBS's highest rated game in forever. It wasn't like a record breaking game in terms of rating. It was the highest rated game they had in quite some time. I forget the exact. I wrote an article about it and took a world of crap for it, but it was fun taking that world of crap. I enjoyed it. I love writing that article. I still have fond memories of it. But anyway, it just goes to show you how valuable the Steelers are. So the NFL, the actual NFL, does not hate the Steelers. These things with these schedules, I don't know. And there's always going to be somebody complaining about it. It's like the NCAA tournament selection, the men's basketball every year. There's always somebody that's going to complain about their seed or somebody that got left out that felt like they should have made it. That's just how it is with this schedule. You have 32 teams, and and they're not the only game in town in their respective cities. You have other sports leagues, you have other events. Sometimes you can. It's easy to get double booked at a venue. So, although there aren't really many multi-stadium or multi-sport stadiums anymore, but I just think it's just a coincidence. Now, if you're talking about the media, the national media especially, do they hate the Steelers? Well, I mean, judging by the way some of them are always just, it's like was it Jason Lock-and-Ford the other day? He ranked all the quarterbacks in tiers, and I think Ben he was in tier number 6, which I assume is the lowest possible tier. I didn't really delve that far into the story, but it makes me laugh because it's like any kind of ranking that includes quarterbacks, Ben's always, and I don't even say disrespected in the eyes of the fans. I think it's pretty obvious. He spent his entire career being underrated, undervalued as a quarterback. It's not fan perception. It's the truth. It's not me saying this because I'm a homer. This is a real thing. But anyway, he had Ben ranked like with Andy Dalton, which just seems ridiculous, honestly. So are there national types that like to see the Steelers fall? And maybe, but you also have to understand that when a team like the Steelers, they're the Yankees, they're the Red Sox, they're the Lakers, they're the Cowboys, they're Notre Dame, they're Duke basketball. I mean, I've used these examples many times. Yes, these are all popular franchises and programs if you're talking about college sports, but there are also lots of people out there that want to see these teams fall. They're sick of them being on top. They're sick of they perceive their fan bases, and maybe rightfully so in a lot of cases, being entitled and irrational and over the top and blah blah blah. So yeah, there are people that probably want to see these teams come down a notch or two. That's just how it is. Sidney Crosby, who's obviously one of the most popular athletes in Pittsburgh sports history. You go on to any NHL comment section, like on Facebook, he's like the NHL's Tom Brady. Everybody outside of Pittsburgh hates his guts. They call him a whiner and this and that and the other, because that's just how it is. So the Steelers are kind of like that team. They're very popular, but they're also maybe not as unpopular as they are popular, if that makes any sense. But there are a lot of fans that really don't like them. There are a lot of national types that probably don't like them. They're human after all. But having said that, when it comes to guys like Lock-and-Ford or any sports reporter out there, national type, I mean, you kind of have to see it from their perspective too. I mean, you look at, they see a player like Ben, who's 39, coming off a major elbow surgery. Whether it was just perception or reality, based on injury or based on just physical limitations, based on his age, he kind of declined a bit last year. Whether that was due to him, his own limitations, or limitations with the offense or the offensive line, whatever. In their eyes, he's a 39-year-old quarterback who declined last year. You can look at his overall stats. 33 and 10 and whatever yards he had, I don't remember. I should know this, but I don't remember it. But in their eyes, he's 39. You got Phillip Rivers just retired, Drew Brees just retired, Eli retired before last year. And then you have these young stud quarterbacks coming into the league: Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, still considered to have enormous potential in the eyes of many. Joe Burrow. Might not be a great example right now, but Deshaun Watson. So, there's all these young hotshot quarterbacks, and three of them are in the Steelers division, and you got Ben. And when you look at history, how many quarterbacks are still playing at that kind of level at his age, right? If you go back and look at any quarterbacks throughout history, there aren't many. Tom Brady's the exception, Peyton Manning, and maybe, Ben still, and Drew Brees was still doing it at a fairly high rate, but it's unusual to see a quarterback playing at that age. And usually when they do, they're not as good as they were when they were younger. It's just the natural order of life. So you have to see it from their perspective. And are they being haters, or are they just trying to be objective about it. I think there's a lot that are being objective, and there are probably a lot that like to see the Steelers fail. It's just natural human behavior. If I was a national reporter, which would be, that'd be a dream come true, and I was covering the NFL, I can't say that I'd be like, oh yeah, I love the Ravens. I really want to see the Ravens do well this year. I'd probably have a hard time being objective about the Ravens or the Patriots or whatever. So you have to remember they're all most media members they were probably fans of some team at some point. So, and how do I think they're going to do next year? I will tell you how I think. And what I think of the Steelers, and this is like when I'm talking about the national reporters and how and even a lot of the fans are just like, I don't see this team doing anything. I don't see it winning more than 6 or 7 games. Honestly, I don't know how you can really say that. Now, if you want to say that the Steelers are one of those 24 teams that may finish anywhere between 7 and 10 and 10 and 7, that kind of thing, then I'll give you that, because I think that's the kind of roster that they have. And I love this quote. I use it just about every chance I get. I didn't hear it directly from Sam Weiss, but I heard somebody quote Sam Weiss, who's obviously passed away recently. And but after his coaching career, he did a lot of network work, analyzing games for whatever networks he was on. And he said when he watched film of every single team before any particular season, you could pick out the handful that were going to win 12, 13, 14 games. You could just tell, just based on talent and whatever, and coaching and everything like that. Everything that you knew this was going to be an elite team, and you could tell the handful of teams that were going to be the opposite of that, on the other side of the spectrum. They were going to be 3, 4, 5 win teams. They did not have good rosters. But he said the other 24 teams were just literally over the course of a year, a few plays away, good or bad, positive or negative plays away from being anywhere from 6 and 10 back when they had 16 games to 10 and 6. And I think that's where the Steelers are with their roster. They're one of those kind of teams. They were one of those kind of teams last year. I think I said that last year. They were that kind of team. They had that kind of overall roster, where they could finish anywhere between 6 and 10, 10 and 6, maybe 11 and 5. Turns out they were 12 and 4, and they started out 11 and 0. I don't think anybody thought that was a realistic. I don't think anybody ever thinks 11 and 0 is realistic heading into a year. Well, there are some fans that think that, but most people don't think that. So I think if you look at their roster objectively, they do have question marks. There's no question. There's no doubt about it. There's questions with the line. There's questions in the secondary. They have a new coordinator. They have a 39-year-old quarterback. They're going to be depending on a lot of new players. Chase Claypool, Kevin Dotson, Alex Highsmith. Obviously, they're going to be depending on a few rookies coming through, namely Najee Harris and Freiermuth being a major contributor, a second-round pick, Kendrick Green. They're probably hoping he can be the starter at center from day one. But, they still have the kind of roster where they could be one of those teams that finishes anywhere between 7 and 10 and 10 and 7, 11 and 6. They have that kind of roster. I think any objective person will look at the Steelers roster and say that. So when people say, well, I don't see them winning any more than 7 games. I don't know. I mean, if everything goes right for them this year, not everything, but if most things go right, and if they remain relatively injury free, which is always important in the NFL, then they have a good chance of making the playoffs, maybe even winning the division. Because if you're closer to 10 and 11 than you are to 7 or 8, and as competitive as the AFC North is, you're going to be in the mix for the division title. I'm not saying on paper they're as good as the Ravens and the Browns, because they're not. On paper, they're probably not as good as either one of those teams. They're just not. But doesn't mean they're not good enough to be competitive and be in the mix till the end. So to automatically say that they're going to win 6 or 7 games, you don't know that, because the NFL is a parity league for a reason, and it's going to come down like it has for them, with the exception of last year because they got off to such a great start. If you go back all the way, to 2010, if you're looking at like just the difference between winning a division or getting a number 2 seed or being a wild card or making the playoffs or not making the playoffs, it seems like every year comes down to a few plays. I mean, you look at 3 years ago, 2018, the infamous collapse at the end of the year. The Broncos lost, the Chargers lost, the Raiders lost, the loss to the Saints. All those games, 2 or 3 plays over the course of those 4, like total over the course of those 4 games, 2 or 3 plays go a different way, and they're the division champs, maybe even number 3 seed. Who knows? And who knows what happens after that? Because they still had AB and that year, and Big Ben led the league in passing, so they had a chance. They might have done some damage that year. So it's been that way for them every year, dating back forever. It's just a few plays seem to be the difference for them, good or bad, and how their season turns out. So I think it's going to be the same way this year, even with the question marks. If you look at the league, every team pretty much, even the elite teams, they have some kind of flaw. I mean, there are no perfect teams. Even the Chiefs, everybody thought they were that team because they won Super Bowl the year before, and last year they made it again. But as it turns out, their line was so bad that Patrick Mahomes ran around for like 4 football fields worth of yards during that game. He was being chased the entire time. And the team that won the Super Bowl last year, the Buccaneers, the team that blew out the Chiefs, at one point they were 7-5 and in danger of missing the playoffs. So every team's flawed. Every team has issues. The Steelers aren't alone in that regard. So why the pessimism? Why the absolutes when it comes to what their record ultimately will be? I don't know, because I don't see that kind of a roster. Maybe I have no perspective because I'm in Pittsburgh and I'm such a huge Steeler fan. But if you just look at that roster, it's hard to imagine them being one of the worst teams in the league or being a 6-win team even. I just don't see it. I see, what would they say, like 9.5, 8.5, whatever the over and under is supposed to be for them this year. And I think that's about right because, if a few plays go right for them, if they stay injury free, if they find answers to some of their questions, if Matt Canada's the offensive breath of fresh air people have been looking for forever, if Ben is even healthier than he was last year, he's going to be having a normal offseason this year as opposed to what he had to go through last year to get ready. Who knows? Maybe they're an 11-win team or even better. We just don't know. And on that note, I will turn it over to you guys and take some comments and questions and see what we got to round out the show. And here's one from Awesome Stuff, and what a name to have to live up to. I'll take your word for it, Awesome Stuff. I know 1983 was a pretty awesome year. And he says, the NFL doesn't hate the Steelers. News writers love building up perennial down teams like the Browns. That's exactly right. And you have to also take into account how popular they were based on what's the name of that show? Hard Knocks, the HBO show. I have a friend of mine who, like 3-4 years ago, the night that the Steelers lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, it shows up in my memories, like or her memories, I guess, once a year. Her singing "Here We Go Steelers" like hours before that game in some bar somewhere with some friend of hers. And now all of a sudden she's a Browns fan, a dedicated Browns fan, always talking trash on the Steelers. And the reason for that is because of Hard Knocks. So you're right. The NFL wants new teams to come up, and it makes for a great story. Imagine that. I mean, put your objective cap back on and imagine how nationally, how neat that would be to see the Browns of all teams win the Super Bowl. The Browns winning the Super Bowl. I mean, you can't even fathom that, right? Even though, despite their talent, their obvious talent that they've acquired over the last few years, the Browns winning the Super Bowl, that would be so weird. It'd be like the Pirates winning the World Series, as far as national perception, up until a couple years ago. Let's see. Here's one from Brian Brown, and he says, I can't see the Steelers losing at all. Never have until it happened. Never will. Here we go, Steelers. Well, that's a very dedicated fan. And I know a lot of those kind of fans. They just won't even – and that's why there's all kind of – there's the total optimist, the total pessimist, and then a bunch of people in between who have varying degrees of optimism and pessimism, and that's fans. So yeah, see, look, Steelers Pittsburgh. Just the thought of it makes them cry. It makes them post the crying emoji, the laughing crying emoji. They just can't believe it. The Browns winning the Super Bowl. Can you believe that? That's crazy. So Sean Manahan says the Clowns ain't winning the Super Bowl. See, nobody can even fathom it. But as far as the national story is concerned, that would be huge. That would be a huge freaking deal for the Browns to win the Super Bowl. Imagine if they beat the Lions in the Super Bowl. Imagine that story. I mean, the ratings probably wouldn't be that great. No offense to those two teams. I mean, they'd be great, but not great compared to other Super Bowls. At least I don't think they would be, but you never know. And here's one from Kenneth Beamer, and he asks or says, I think he says, there's 3 exclamation points marks, and he says, Claypool and James Washington more involved this year, please. Well, I mean, you just never know with Matt Canada's new system. You definitely have to have Claypool involved. I mean, he's too much of a weapon. I mean, I think we saw that last year. He's a mismatch. He's a matchup problem. He's a beast. He's a stud. He looks like he's another DK Metcalf type, right? I think he can be something very special. And James Washington, I think his issue has always been just a numbers game. I mean, you have Juju, you have Deontay Johnson now, Claypool, Eric Ebron figured heavily into the passing game last year. He's just one of those odd man out kind of players, unfortunately for him. But hey, sometimes you just have to break through the glass ceiling on your own. So James Washington, the talent's pretty obvious. It's just a matter of just reaching your potential if you're him. Here's one from Stephen Carestis. As much as I don't want to see the Browns do well, I want them to do well enough this year where they have to play Baker 40 plus or pay Baker 40 plus million a year that he doesn't deserve, so I can laugh about that. Well, I guess he would only prove that he doesn't deserve it if he goes on and has a Joe Flacco kind of career after that. You remember Flacco, he had the playoff run of his life just at the right time back in 2012. What was it? 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, whatever that was, leading the Ravens to the Super Bowl and beating the 49ers. And he was a free agent after that, and they had to pay him buku bucks. But, you know, if he wins the Super Bowl and then goes on and continues to have success, then he will have deserved that contract. But the thing about it is, as Pittsburgh fans have been dealing with for the last 8-9 years, whatever it's been, when you have a quarterback taking up that much of your cap space, it makes it tough to build a roster around him, build a team around him, and remain competitive, or not necessarily competitive, but elite competitive, like Pittsburgh was in the 2000s. But that's another, example of the NFL being a parity league. I mean, that's the NFL is all about, if the higher you go, the easier it is for you to come back down. The lower you are, the easier they try to make it for you to sort of come back up. Somebody once joked they want everybody eventually to be 8-8, but I don't think that'll ever happen. But you never know. Some of these years, it seems like that's a possibility. It's in Niner for life. Yeah, we have a Niners fan in here, and he says Niners all day. I don't know. I went to high school with a guy who's a big Niners fan. He's literally a half a mile away. He's got a big 49ers banner hanging up in his on his porch. I wonder if that's him. Let's see here. What else we have? Here's awesome stuff. And he says, I hope Baker plays poorly enough that the Browns have to start over at quarterback. 2 different opinions. It's like a round table discussion. What else we have here? As far as questions and comments. And this one from Ryan O'Toole, and he says, the 2020 offensive line made everyone look bad. Well, I think that was a big part of it. I think Pouncey was on decline. I think he had been for a couple of years. There are varying opinions about Al Villanueva and his play over the last few years, but I think it's safe to say he kind of declined a little bit. He regressed since the height of his career, which is probably like 2017, 2018. DeCastro was not right at all last year. And then, your starting right tackle, the guy who won the competition on the training camp, Zach Banner, he was gone by the end of week 1 with a torn ACL. So, and I like Shooks, but he lost the competition. So, their line, and Matt Filer struggled mightily at left guard. So, yeah, the line was a big issue last year. It was a big deal. And there are so many things being thrown around. Was it Ben calling his own plays? Was it Randy Fichtner being too predictable? Was Ben just too afraid to get hit? Was he injured? Were his knees bad? Everything's been said. So I don't know. They definitely have to solve that problem this year. They have to figure the line out. It's one of the issues they have to solve. One of the question marks they have to answer in a positive way if they're going to be closer to those 10 or 11 wins that I said, and not closer to 7 or 8 or 6 or whatever it winds up being. But yeah, they definitely have to figure out that line. And here's one from Game Theory who says Deontay is the number 1 receiver. I know there's somebody in here right now. I can't remember who it is, but they will emphatically disagree with you. They think Ray McLeod should start over Deontay Johnson. But I agree. I don't know if he's the number 1 receiver, but I think he's definitely the one that's going to get targeted the most. I think the passing game, at least under the old regime with Randy Fichtner and that whole scheme, it flowed through Johnson. That might change now. It might change with Matt Canada. We don't know. He's his own man, and if you're the Steelers, you're going to want your coordinator to have the scheme that he wants to have if you want to have success. I mean, obviously he has to tailor it to his personnel. I think any coordinator, any good coach would agree with that. You can't be stubborn and try to fit a square peg into a round hole, or however that saying goes. But it's going to be interesting because you have Ben. He's an old dog. Is he going to how many new tricks is he going to want to learn for 2021? You have Canada, who runs the kind of offense, at least he has in the past, that's directly opposite of the kind of quarterback that Ben is, as far as the motion, the RPO, and so it's going to be an interesting development. Excuse me. Jeff Hartman posted something today, a tweet from Mark Caboli, who covers the Steelers for The Athletic, I believe. And he said he couldn't get into particulars because they're not allowed to do that. But the rookies are at rookie camp, and he said based on his initial what he's seen from Matt Canada's offense so far, and you can't really glean a whole lot from that based on rookie minicamp. But he said it looks like it might be pretty unique and different in 2021. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I was kind of making fun of people for a couple of years about Matt Canada, but being the secret coordinator, or was it just a year? I guess it was just a year. But hey, I'm all on board now. He's the coordinator, and I want to see him and them do well, because I want to see the team do well as always. So. And here's another one from Ryan O'Toole, and he says, at least with 17 games now, we know they will never be 8-8 again. That's true. That's true. It'll take 9-8 now for Tomlin to keep his streak alive of no losing seasons. And Brian Brown says, Ben wants a ring. I believe he'll do whatever it takes. There you go. I hope so. I think he's more dedicated to that than people will ever admit, or people his detractors will ever admit. Because here's a guy who, like I said earlier in the show, he never gets the love when it comes to any kind of quarterback ranking. He always seems to be lower than maybe he should be. He's always considered a playground quarterback, which has its endearing qualities. He's obviously made a fantastic career out of himself for himself with plays that break down and he has to improvise. Excuse me, but Ben's never gonna be an MVP. He's obviously. It's never going to happen for him. I think at this stage, no matter how great he is, people are never going to vote for him to be MVP. He's never going to hold any record, any passing record like an all-time league-wide passing record when he retires. So the only thing that he can really, other than his overall great career, the only thing that he can that nobody can ever take away from him is winning titles. So if he can go out with a third ring, I think he'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. I think he's dedicated to doing it. All these guys have big egos. I'm not that naive. I know he's got an ego, and I know he can be difficult to deal with. I think that's pretty. It's not out of line. I'm not speaking out of school when I say that. He's been here long enough. Certainly, I think we all know him a little bit just from the kind of, at least his playing persona and his teammate persona. We know that he's not necessarily, the easiest guy to maybe always get along with, but I think he's always been dedicated to he's always cared about winning more than anything else. So what better way to basically shut everybody up and do the whole who's laughing now O-line, but for himself, then going out with a third Super Bowl ring. So there's a lot to be excited about with the 2021 Steelers. So I can't wait to see how the rest of the summer unfolds, and then we get into training camp and preseason. There's gonna be preseason this year. I'm excited about that, and then of course the regular season. So, but we have a lot to talk about between now and then. A lot more podcasts, a lot more things to cover on Behind the Steel Curtain, the website. So please, as always, check all those shows out. Check out the website daily. And I think on that note, I am going to call it a night. It's 9:52 where I am, and I need to get some shut-eye. And when I say that, I'm going to watch the show Shut-Eye on Hulu. So I will bid you all adieu, and thank you for the participation. Thank you for the great questions and comments. And thank you for joining me. And until I talk to you again, have a great weekend and go Steelers.